So my name is Melissa Bell. I work with the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. I'm their field research, outreach, and education liaison. John, who's not with us, I'm sure many of you have attended these in the past. He's the North Carolina Cooperative Extension for Durham County. But like I said, he's not able to be here today, so I'm going to be doing the entire webinar. We're going to be talking about some common summer fruits and vegetables. We're going to talk about maintenance techniques, pruning for optimal plant growth and disease control, some trellis options, common pests and diseases, of course, resources. We're going to talk today about tomatoes, cucumbers, and garden beans. First off, a very handy resource is the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Planting Calendar. If you just search for that, you'll see a link for this PDF. It's a really reliable resource for direct seeding and transplanting dates for North Carolina. And it has the planting dates for each region of North Carolina, the coast, mountains, and the Piedmont. This is what it looks like. And so you can see in blue is the eastern part of the state, the Piedmont, and then the mountains. And it will tell you whether you need days to harvest if you're transplanting or if you're direct seeding, and then the spacing between plants. Very handy guide. Before we plant, we want to make sure that we're going to reduce plant stress. We want to set our plants up for success. We don't want stress that's going to reduce photosynthesis and overall growth of the plants, and we don't want to have a stressed out plant that is going to attract pests. Some stressors could be overly wet or dry conditions, a soil pH that's too high or too low, deficient or excessive nutrients, planting too deep or too shallow, and of course, soil compaction. So we're going to want to take steps to maintain a healthy soil. So we want to support our microorganisms that are doing all our recycling of nutrients and breaking down of biomass. So we want to get our soil tested so that we can manage nutrients and manage pH. We want to add organic matter whenever possible. And then we want to manage conditions and manage our actions to prevent compaction whenever possible. So you see in this picture, this lovely picture here, there's something growing in the soil. You see the roots. We should always strive to have something growing in the soil. We also want to make sure that we're rotating our crops. I'm sure that you've heard that you need to rotate to decrease plant pathogens in the soil and also plant pests. So what rotating crops mean is to avoid planting crops from the same family in the same space year after year. So you can think about it in as plant families, like a cucurbits, very big family with cucumbers and squashes and melons and pumpkins. Or you can look at it, John has this nice picture here in the sense of like legumes versus root vegetables versus fruits like tomatoes and cucumbers, and leaf vegetables like lettuces and spinaches, and rotate that. So you want to rotate for a minimum of 3 years to see real benefits, and then include cover crops whenever possible. If you are able to divide your growing space into 4 plots, perhaps you only grow edible vegetables in 3, and you leave 1 for a cover crop to rotate around. That's one way that you could incorporate cover crops. Okay, I'm not going to go down the cover crop road. Let's go on to the next slide. So first up, garden beans, growing beans. There are 4 basic types. These are John's slides, so bear with me. There's our pole beans. These are vining plants. They require structural support because they can get very tall. We want to maximize vertical space for these pole beans. They're slower to mature, but they produce continuously throughout most of the season. This is versus bush beans, which are lower growing, compact. They don't really need structural support. They're good for small spaces. They're good for containers. And they are quicker to harvest, quicker to mature, and you can plant them a little closer together. So you don't need a trellis for your bush beans. Now, our other 2 are fillet beans and shelling beans. So depending on what kind of bean you want to grow, then you can look in catalogs or online or at your local store to see what the different varieties are and what the different varieties offer for the kind of bean you want to grow. So fillet beans, this is this nice picture here. These are the slender snap beans. They have the tender pods they're picked when they're young. and they're available in both bush and pole varieties. Now the shelling beans, those are the beans that we're growing for the mature seeds, not eating the pods. So like pinto beans, kidney beans, cannellini beans, also available in both bush and pole varieties. They have a longer season because you're going to harvest when the pod is completely mature and has dried down. A note here, you want to minimize watering later in the season because you don't want to get moldy pods with these dried beans. How and when to plant beans. You can look at your planting calendar. In the Piedmont, we're talking, mid-April to later April into May in the mountains. So you want to wait till the soil's consistently above 35 degrees because you don't want to have any rotting beans. Succession planting for continuous harvest. So this is certainly fun. You don't need to do it for pole beans, but you can do that with bush beans. Sorry, let me go back one. Yeah, the row spacing dependent on preference, 4 to 6 inches apart for both the pole bean and the bush beans. Bush beans you can succession plant so you can have a continual harvest. The pole beans are going to keep growing all through the summer, so you don't really need to do a successional harvest with them. Here, okay. Soil and nutrient concerns for beans. They really thrive in well-drained, fertile soils. They don't like to have wet feet. You can put them in a raised bed, or you can, hill them if you're having trouble with standing water or really wet soil. You can add organic matter before planting and fertilize early. These are good ideas for beans. You don't need to put nitrogen down on beans because they're legumes and they're providing their own nitrogen. So if they get too much nitrogen, you're going to get a lot of leaf and stem growth and not pod development. Here's a link here to Minnesota Extension about growing beans in the home garden. But that's an important thing to remember, that with legumes, you don't need to add nitrogen. They like full sun, 8 hours direct sunlight per day, consistent moisture all along they're growing, but especially when the seed pods, when they're flowering and pods starts to develop, you want to make sure they're getting enough water. So mulching is always a good idea to conserve water and to regulate the temperatures. And they have really shallow roots, so when you're weeding, you want to be careful. And then frequent harvesting encourages pod production. Now, trellising for pole beans. Pole beans, you have to trellis. This is for a traditional stake and wire trellis. I have some pictures in the next slide. But here you're gonna use like tread-in stakes every 15 to 20 feet along the row. This is for growing a lot of beans. And you want to leave like 5 or 6 feet above ground because you're going to want a lot of vertical growth. You're going to attach a top wire, and you're going to attach a bottom wire. This is NC State publication about pole beans talking here. This is a good resource. And then you're going to create a trellis, a climbing support for the beans. So you're in a crisscross shape pattern from the top wire and the bottom wire. You're going to make a pattern, and then the beans can climb up that. Tie each twine stand from the top wire to the bottom wire securely. And a tip, you want to set this up early. You don't want to try to be messing around with creating your support crisscross after the beans have already been growing to prevent harming any of the beans. Alternative trellising methods, you can use an existing fence, a chain link fence or a wire fence, and then you don't need any extra support. You can plant with corn. So this is part of the Three Sisters method. You can plant beans alongside corn, either at the same time or a little bit after you plant your corn. And then the beans climb the corn stalks. The corn stalks act as a living trellis. Many of you know the Three Sisters method with the corn and the beans and the pumpkin. We talked about it in our last webinar. These are some alternatives. I'm thinking about doing this year because I have just one raised bed I want to grow some beans in. This is also a good alternative. You have this cattle panel, but you've got tread-in fence posts here. and this is tied securely to the fence posts to keep it in this arched, keep it safely in this arched form. And then this is sort of a closer, better picture of the wire stake, the first one we talked about with a top wire here and the top wire here. And they don't, here he doesn't have the crisscross pattern, but this is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about creating this network with twine for the beans to grow up. So it depends on what kind of space you have and what you want to do to grow pole beans. So common pests and pathogens. I mean, he's got some notes on this here. Okay. Fruit worms, they're caterpillars. They bore into the seed pods. They feed on the developing seeds. And so they can reduce yields. They're most active in late summer, and they're hard to detect until the damage is done. You want to introduce natural enemies. You could, like the parasitoid wasps or beneficial predatory insects like lacewings. You could use a BT insecticide. The next one would be red spider mites. They are tiny red or yellow mites that suck sap from the underside of the leaves. They thrive in hot, dry weather, and they can defoliate plants. You can spray with a strong stream of water to knock them off and remove their webbing. You want to maintain adequate soil moisture so that the plant is not stressed out. And insecticidal soaps or horticultural oils like neem oil, thoroughly covering the underside of the leaf, can help get rid of these. You can use miticides for severe infestations, and then you want to rotate crops. And then Mexican bean beetles, bean leaf beetles. These are the yellow-orange. He didn't put a picture in here. Yellow-orange beetles with black spots. You can use floating row cover immediately after planting to exclude these beetles. Of course, you want to take that off when you see flowers. You can hand pick or destroy the egg clusters. I guess I would look online to see that the Mexican bean beetles and the leaf beetles, what their eggs look like. So you can destroy those. You can use insecticides or neem oil. The bean leaf beetles are smaller. They chew around holes in the leaves and pods, but they can also transmit plant viruses. I wish there was a picture here. There is a link here from NC State Extension talking about the Mexican bean leaf beetle. So I'm sure that has pictures in lots of ways. Oh, well, here's a picture right here of eggs, and here's a beneficial. And I'm not sure what's in these pictures. Sorry, I apologize. Pest and pathogen concerns. Again, we're talking here about root rot. So root rot is a fungal pathogen in the soil. It's in poorly drained soils, can infect the roots, and then you get stunted plants, yellowing leaves. It's especially common in wet conditions or in compacted garden beds. So you want to improve soil drainage. You can plant in raised beds. You want to rotate for non-host crops. Encourage beneficial microorganisms by adding organic amendments. Bean rust is another one then, defoliation, leaf damage. It's also a fungal disease. You can plant resistant varieties to bean rust. You want to make sure you're planting at the right time to avoid favorable conditions for this rust. So again, NC State Extension, I'll show that resource link at the very end, but they have, they have pathogens and pests, either if you want to search for your crop or if you want to just search for the pest or pathogen, and you'll find resources there to help you, telling you all about that. Okay, growing cucumbers. So this is the part of the webinar that I did. Cucumbers like full sun, a well-drained soil. They need warm soil to germinate, so we don't want to plant too early. Again, we're going to look at our planting calendar, but April 15th is a good time. They're medium nitrogen users, but they are higher. They need a little more phosphorus and potassium, so you're going to want to make sure that you get your soil tested. If you're planting now, you should have already had your soil tested. If you're planting for the fall, now's a good time to test your soil. They have shallow roots, so we want to water evenly, about an inch a week. Again, hopefully we're using drip tape. or we're watering near the base of the plant in the morning so that we're avoiding wet foliage. We're going to plant them on a trellis. We're going to grow cucumbers on a trellis, 12 inches apart at the base. And depending on, look at your seed packet, 50 to 70 days. There's a lot of different cucumbers varieties out there. So whether you're doing pickling, 3 to 6 inches, or you're growing like market more slicers, 3 to 6 inches long, you cut from the vine. They get too big, they get too seedy, and they're not very tasty. Anyone who's grown cucumbers before knows that one cucumber plant is going to produce a lot of cucumbers. I think the rule of thumb is one plant per family member when you're growing cucumbers. So we are going to trellis cucumbers and we're going to prune them for plant health. You're going to start pruning after 3 to 5 weeks. We want to focus on a main stem for our vertical growth. And we're going to start at the bottom of the plant, moving up, pruning suckers at each node. We're going to leave one sucker underneath the growing tip in case something happens to our growing tip. So let's look at a picture here. This was a video that I found long ago from the gardening channel. I'm sure there's lots of good videos out there to help you wrap your head around pruning. This picture, unfortunately, is not so good. My next picture is better. But here's our main vertical stem. And at every single node, you're going to have your sun leaf, your leaf. You're going to have the cucumber. You're going to have a tendril. And then you're going to have a sucker. Let's look at this picture. So here's our main stem. We have our sun leaf. We have our male and female flowers. We have our cucumber. We have our tendril. And then we have this sucker. So same with tomatoes that we'll see. You want to prune off these suckers because they want to go ahead and form a whole nother plant. And so we want to set our plant up for success. We want to minimize these suckers, or you're just going to have a huge mess, and you're going to invite disease because you're going to have not enough airflow, and you're not going to have enough sunlight penetration, and you're going to have wet leaves touching each other. So you can see here they pruned this one. You can just pinch it off at each node. You're going to have this sucker. This one has gotten too big, and you're going to have to need pruners to make a nice little cut. One good thing to know is that as the cucumber grows higher, this is also the same with tomatoes, you can remove the lower leaves. The plant does not need those lower leaves anymore, and you want to minimize leaf soil contact. So as the plant is growing up the trellis, you can remove those lower leaves. This is a cool little system, often used in greenhouses with this roller hook. So, in greenhouses, things are typically grown on plastic. So they're able to, as the cucumber reaches the top of the trellis, they can remove the lower leaves and unwind this so the plant lowers down and you can just lay on the surface and continue. Then you have more space to continue for vertical growth. So if you can, think of something like that, you can remove those lower leaves. So let's look at some options for trellising cucumbers. The biggest thing for cucumbers, Meredith, I just noticed it says your meeting will end in 10 minutes. I'm not sure what's up with that. But I'm just going to continue on
Keep
here.
going. I'll look into it.
Okay. So we're growing our cucumber on trellis because trellis grown crops often produce higher yields. You can grow a lot more per square foot. You're decreasing soil-borne fruit and foliar diseases because you're letting air flow and sunlight penetration, keeping things off the ground. Always a good idea. For cucumbers, we're going to need strong and sturdy. This is nice. This cage is nice for one plant. You wouldn't want to put more than one plant in a cage. Also, the cage is going to need to be tall. We can see in this picture here, this is a great idea. They're shading their lettuce, very easy to get to the fruit, but you can see that the plant is already growing over the top. Cucumbers are going to keep growing very high. So perhaps if they extended this with another panel, that might help, but they're going to have a problem soon. I like this one. I like how they're just one plant per pole. That will quickly be filled up. As you can see here, this one is smaller. And depending on how many plants they have here, this is going to be crowded and maybe a little hard to get to the fruit. An existing fence, great idea. Just make sure that it's tall. This one, perhaps turning it on its side, so it's taller, would work well. I worry a little bit about crowding here. Um, we have hot, humid summers here in North Carolina, and even on a trellis like this, you're going to see a lot of jumping between the strings. So this is one that I used last year, and I will definitely put my strings farther apart this year because I just had just a terrible time trying to keep one vertical line. But this is something that I used with bamboo. This is really tall. I had to get on a ladder to tie these together. I have a bottom line here, and then the cucumbers are growing up. And it was a little bit of a hide and seek with this sort of system to try to find the cucumbers, but it did work well. I did find that ripping up an old t-shirt and tying these poles together worked a lot better than any string or twine. It is helpful to secure the cucumber to the vine, either with zip ties or string or these handy little clips. But no matter what you do, the cucumbers, they're going to jump strings. So you just really want to, again, you're trying to keep stuff off the ground and maximize airflow. Some problems with cucurbits for sure, bacterial wilt. These are from our striped and spotted cucumber beetles. So they are munching on the leaves, and they are the bacteria overwinters in their gut, and so they inject it into the plant when they're munching, and it clogs the vascular tissue, and you get really quickly spreading wilting. Can cause a big loss in cucumbers. Once infected, there's nothing you can do. There's insect management here. This is an NC State Extension link for insect management on cucurbits. But there are cultural controls for the cucumber beetle. One is you can plant resistant varieties. I'll talk just a little bit more about that in a second. You can exclude cucumber beetles. Here is our row cover. And so they are putting the row cover on when they plant. Here's a picture of the wilt. You want to remove all this infected material so that insects that are moving through your garden aren't spreading it. You want to make sure that you're rotating your crops. And then there's trap crops. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of using a trap crop. So cucumber beetles actually prefer kabocha type squash. Our red curry, my favorite, these kabocha squashes. So what you can do is you can plant kabocha type squashes in a perimeter or in a patch nearby several weeks before you plant your cucumber. And then when the cucumber beetle arrives, it's going to go there because it prefers them. And then you can choose how to destroy those cucumber beetles. So you want to use good sanitation. You want to exclude whenever possible. Maybe you want to plant a resistant variety, and you could try a trap crop. Some of the common fungal pathogens for cucurbits, it's a wide range of fungal pathogens. There's a huge genus that cause these leaf spots. Excuse me. They like humid, high rainfall and warm temperatures. They can affect all above ground parts. So they affect the leaves and the stem and the fruit. They cause circular black sunken cankers on the fruit. So this is anthracnose. This is one of our fungal pathogens. You can look that up on NC State Extension. So here's what it looks like in cucumbers. Really common to see this. The spores are splashed from the soil or from contaminated plants, also by humans touching plant tissue and then touching, infected plant tissue and then touching healthy tissue. And then the cucumber beetles, while they're walking around on your cucumbers, can walk through the spores and then spread it that way. So you definitely want to get rid of any infected material. This is what it looks like on the cucumber. There are resistant varieties to anthracnose. When you're looking at a catalog or online, you'll see a variety. It'll be a hybrid seed that has a disease package. It'll say high resistance to mildew, medium resistance to anthracnose, resistance to this, or it'll say like excellent disease package for the Southeast. I'll talk about that again in a minute. So we're going to rotate our crops, control any volunteer cucurbit plants and weeds, avoid working crops when they're wet. It's much easier to spread this around. Um, avoid overhead watering, maybe some mulch down so that you're not splashing. You want to avoid soil splash onto your plants. Completely remove or bury debris at the end of the season. And there are organic sprays that you can use. Like I said, but we've said before, I'm sure that there's chemical controls out there. We deal with organic mostly, so you can look that stuff up. But if you're doing it organically, there are copper sprays that can control these leaf spots, and you want to go out there and spray your leaves like once a week. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about, I keep talking about resistant varieties, which is really helpful. So these are hybrids, right? Hybrid seed involve human intervention. This does not mean GMO. It just means plant breeding, traditional plant breeding, cross-pollinating two varieties with a specific trait in mind. In this case, we're talking about disease resistance. These seeds are much more expensive. And if I buy tomato hybrid seed, it's like, $3.50, $4 for 10 seeds. But the disease resistance is real. But you can't save hybrid seed because the offspring will not necessarily be like the parent plant because you're cross-pollinating these two different varieties. So again, this is not GMO, this is traditional plant breeding. That's versus open pollinated, which is natural pollination by wind or insects to transfer the pollen. So
Hey,
these are,
Melissa.
yes,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I have created a new Zoom link since this one is going to end. I'm ready to send it in the chat. Do you want me to go ahead and do that so we can join? I've saved the chat and all of the questions we have so far.
I guess so. If it's going to quit, we don't have much of a choice, huh?
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm so sorry about that. I have opened up a new Zoom for us. I'm getting ready to drop it in the chat for you guys. If you'll just click the link and join that one, we can pick up where we left off. Both recordings will be sent to you guys as soon as the meeting is over.
Okay, be sure to let Adam know. He's sitting in the waiting room. Both have benefits. I often bought hybrid seed. This year I bought a bunch of I bought all open pollinated seed from So True Seed because I wanted to save seed. So just a note on those terms. So tomatoes. We have determinate tomatoes and we have indeterminate tomatoes. Our determinate tomatoes are the bush variety. They grow 3 to 4 feet and then they set all their fruit in a 2 to 3 week period. They do not need pruned. These varieties are popular for if you're going to can because you get a lot of tomatoes at the same time. So very useful if you're canning. Um, versus indeterminate, which continue to grow over a long period of time until frost kills them. They need staking, they need a lot of support, and they need pruning. There's many varieties available of either kind. I often grow both. Um, so determinate our trellising options are not really, we're just staking. We're staking to support a bush tomato. A lot of these heirloom varieties can get very heavy. Here we just see, tied to a stake. Here we have the stake with a cage. Same here. If you're growing a handful of tomatoes, these tomato cages are a really good option. But also is a stake. Tying it to a stake is a really good idea. The cages are nice because the fruit can hang on the little interim bars and help support those branches that have the heavy fruit. Now, indeterminate tomatoes, we're going to have to prune because once again, we have these suckers that want to grow off and make a whole new plant. And our plant can't really support all that. We want to focus on a main stem. So this is what it looks like at each node. We have this sucker that you can just pinch off. So here is our main stem. We have our leaves and we have our tomato fruit cluster. At each node, we're going to have a sucker. So we're going to remove these suckers with the caveat that we find our first fruit and flower cluster, and then we keep that sucker right below it. It's the strongest one on the plant, and we keep that to grow and bear fruit on a second stem. we prune off everything else. Here we see our growing tip, and we're removing suckers at each one. We don't want to remove the fruit and flower cluster. You see that there's no leaf around here. So this is not somewhere where you need to prune. You're looking at the leaf, the junction here between the leaf and the main stem. Again, you can remove these lower leaves as the plant is growing. Maximize airflow and also keep soil to plant splash down or non-existent. So we're going to prune our indeterminate tomatoes. We don't need to worry about pruning our determinate tomatoes. So trellising our indeterminate tomatoes. Strong and sturdy. It doesn't have to be as tall like the cucumbers, but we need strong and sturdy. So you're most likely going to use these tread-in T-posts. Get yourself one of those T-post pounders. And some tomato twine if you can. You can find it at a growing store or online. Works a lot better than string or twine. It doesn't sag over the summer. So this one is nice. They have this. They've put in, it's probably rebar. They've put in a top bar and put string down from the top, and so the plant is growing up that. I use this what is called the Florida weave. So they've got a couple of plants in between the T-posts. T-posts, they are an investment. They're not cheap. $7 or $8 per T-post, depending on height, but they will last you forever. So the Florida weave is wrapping around the plant back and forth. You're weaving it around the plant. And so you have this nice, secure, system here. I recommend you're going to put these strings, every 6 to 7 inches along, and I recommend doing it right away when you plant so that you're not out there in the heat trying to battle all this growth to put in and weave around these plants. Really, you should put them all the way up to the top. Even with this system, I found that the plants tend to lean in either direction, so there's a lot of tying, just monitoring, and removing lower plants, removing the lower leaves, because with tomatoes you're gonna, by July you have a mess in here. I've done a lot of tying from the post to the plant to keep it upright so that the plants don't grow, fall into each other. So this is an option. There's some other options. This is a homegrown option with the bamboo. I like this because it's, if these are sturdy in the ground because they're tied to these little posts that are pounded into the ground. And then again, these are growing, strings from the top down, and the tomato will grow up these strings. A lot of common problems, these pathogens, early blight. I'm sure you've all heard of early blight and late blight. So you get with early blight, the defoliation occurs in the lower part of the plant, and then the leaves fall off, and you get sun scald. You get lesions on the leaves that get bigger, and then the whole leaf turns yellow and then falls off. You get these concentric rings. Let's see if we have a picture here. We don't. The next one has a picture, but you get concentric ring on the leaves. Early blight starts at the bottom of the plant, favors warm temperatures and lots of rainfall. It's caused by the fungus Alternaria. It can also survive in the soil on crop debris. So you make sure you're rotating, spread by wind and air currents and water splash. So mulching helps. For organic growers, the cultural control is best. So we want to remove any infected material. We want to rotate our crops, plant resistant varieties if that's what you want to do, and then control for soil splash. You can see here they have it on plastic. So late blight, there's a link, tomato, the vegetable pathology fact sheets will tell you all about late blight and early blight. This link says early blight, but it's not. It takes you to a link for late blight. This is Phytophthora, and this is what caused the Irish potato famine. Potatoes and tomatoes are in the same family. And here you'll see those concentric rings. Now, late blight likes cool, damp conditions, and it starts at the top of the plant on the youngest leaves. And you get these lesions causing the leaf it spreads and causing the leaf to die. And then you get sun scald too. So again, we're rotating. resistant varieties. There's copper sprays that you can spray on the leaves. You just have, it's taxing. You have to cover the leaf completely with these sprays. But check out these links here. Plant pathology fact sheets for almost any fungal disease that you have in your garden. Um, and then this is blossom end rot. Nothing worse than going out to the garden to pick a bright red tomato and sinking your fingers into this squishy rotted tomato. This is abiotic. It's not caused by a pest or a pathogen. It's caused by low calcium in the developing fruit. It's really common in the summer on tomatoes and on squash. So calcium is essential. It becomes less available under acidic conditions, which is what we have mostly here in North Carolina. So you want to get your soil tested at the soil testing lab. There's a link here for the NCDA and agronomic division to get your soil tested. It's free for everyone. I think it costs $4 if you go during what they call their peak season, November through I think March. Still, $4 is not bad. So you know what your pH is. It will tell you about calcium. There are foliar sprays that you can buy. If you see this problem, you can spray with calcium. So common bacterial and fungal pathogens, we talked a little bit about them. Our bacterial wilt, which is spread by the cucumber beetles. Powdery mildew is a big one, common in mid to late summer on all cucurbits. Then our anthracnose and our alternaria. So again, plant pathology, these publications and fact sheets. You can search these publications. You can search by plant category, or you can search by the disease, and it'll give you a lot of information. There is so NC State does also have a plant disease clinic, and this link will take you to how to submit a sample to NC State Extension, and it will tell you what disease you have on your plant. There's also a link here for entomology for our pests, pests and beneficials for vegetables, NC State Extension, and there's just a ton of, this is probably Debbie Roos's page, Growing Small Farms with tons of pictures, beautiful pictures. What time is it? Let's take a look. Yep, Growing Small Farms. So she's got all these pests and great pictures of them. She's an amazing photographer. There's our corn earworm. Anyway, excellent resource there. Okay. And then how to submit a sample. So we have aphids are common, cucumber beetles, squash vine borers. There are cultural controls for each of these. Aphids you can spray off with a hose. Cucumber beetles we've seen you can exclude or use a trap crop, or squash vine borers. You want to, early in the season you want to keep an eye out for those moths that are going to lay eggs. And then the vine borer is going to, emerge at the base of the squash and bore into the squash. And then squash bugs, if your planting is small enough, every evening you go out and you pick off the squash bugs and you kill the eggs on the underside of the leaf. So lots of good resources here. John is out of town right now, but he will be back. Feel free to email him or email myself. Sorry for the hiccup in the middle of the webinar, but as Meredith said, every participant will get the recording of both parts. Let me go over to the chat here and see if I can see some questions. In the previous chats asked, anthracnose, once the infected plant is removed, should the soil also be removed? No, you what you want to do is control for soil splash. You want to keep the soil off the plant. You do want to remove the infected plant material, and then you want to stop any more of the soil from splashing up onto the plant. Could you treat blossom end rot by putting, I don't know. I don't think so. I think you need to spray the foliage and the fruit. Someone asked, could you treat blossom end rot with like Tums, which is a calcium carbonate, which is, in theory, that's a really interesting idea, but I think it's that would probably take too long to react, and help out your tomatoes. So there's foliar sprays that you can use, or like adding bone meal. I mean, if you get your soil test and your calcium's low, adding something like bone meal or perhaps Tums is a great idea. The soil test will tell you, and if your calcium's low, it'll have a little paragraph. It'll have like a little number, a footnote, and you go and you read about it, and it'll tell you how you can increase the calcium in your soil. Some of it has to, it's pH dependent too. The pH affects the availability of macro and micronutrients, and it affects them differently. So the soil test will really help you tease all that out. Does anyone else have any questions? They can unmute and just ask me. Because I talk fast. I talk a lot faster than John. So we're ending a little early. I hope to see everyone at the next webinar. I think we're talking about planting your garden. Thank you, Margaret. I hope you enjoyed it. Yes. Okay, well, if no one has any questions, I'll send along the recordings, and if anybody wants the slide deck, just email me. And Meredith, I'll catch up with you in a minute, and I guess we'll go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing, and we can end the webinar.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.